Hi, I'm Theron Q Ramacharaka. Do self-mastery tools. Do methods, techniques for self-mastery, anti-consciousness hijacking and perception deception methods, mental discipline techniques, personal evolvement techniques. Will they work for people with mental illnesses? Will they work for people for whom they just don't seem to work very well? All right. Years ago, when I fashioned my own material from all of my research, investigation, experimentation, and application of the material that I present, either one-on-one with somebody, as a regime, personal involvement, self-mastery, attainment to, movement toward true selfhood, regime, program, or here on my channel, more generally. I have said years ago that this stuff is not for the severely mentally ill. It's not really for people with significantly lower than average intelligence. And it's not really for people with severe drug addictions. It's not going to work very well. And especially with the mental illness thing, depending on the mental illness, you might not want such a person to engage in some of this. They may have motives that are very unrefined and destructive and not be able to do much about that or desire to do too much about that. I don't have any interest in doing much about that. So they could get involved in some rather destructive activity toward themselves and other people. All right. Well, I still maintain that latter part. But let's just ask, will this stuff have effect? Now, all right. Let's say a person has pretty strong mental illness, personality disorder, for example, some kind of personality disorder, except for the antisocial or sociopath or psychopathic style personality disorder. With the exception of that, and maybe narcissistic personality disorder, let's count those out. Those are people who would be probably pretty unscrupulous about how they apply such developments in their lives. Just have some rather destructive motives. Excuse me. All right, with the exception of that, let's just say a person with pretty bad depression. Their mind is just constantly overwhelmed with negative thinking. Well, is much of this going to actually help? This kind of material here going to actually help that person very much? My thinking formerly was not much. No, a person who's depressed is probably not even going to have much interest in it, and they're probably just going to flounder with it, and then they'll get discouraged by it and think it doesn't work. There's something else for them that doesn't work. So, I would just recommend that such a person, at least I'm not going to spend a lot of time with such a person because it's going to be a waste of time and could end up with a negative result. Excuse me. All right. But let me go ahead and propose an opposing point of view about this. Can a person benefit from such work if that person has a severe mental illness? But I'm not talking about something completely psychotic or like during a psychotic episode. But then again, maybe I am talking about it. Let me get right to the point here. Okay. I'll just talk from personal experience. Right now in my life, a person may take a look at me, a snapshot of my current state of affairs in life and say, Well, TQR dude, you know all this stuff. You say you have experiences of applying all this stuff in your own life. But I see that you're a lazy bastard. And, you don't have, like, obviously you're not a master. You haven't attained self-mastery to any significant degree. You have a hell of a lot of shortcomings. You go out of whack sometimes. Your emotional control seems to be sometimes pretty lacking. Are you sure this stuff does anything for you? I mean, I don't really see it. But you see, that's a snapshot. I can tell you this, that regardless of how accurately put that snapshot statement, or that statement, that perception of me in a snapshot view of me today, regardless of how accurately that is put, take a look at a non-snapshot view, a dynamic view through time, like where my starting point was, what that was, and compare, then and now. You may see that this material has worked wonders for me. That's on a different view. It's not a snapshot view, just now, the status quo right now. Stat. Not static, dynamic. This is a relative assessment, and it is for everybody. How much progress have you made in your personal evolvement? Now, from this point of view about things, this more dynamic perspective, or line of discourse about it, will such work in personal evolvement as the material that I present here, the William Walker Atkinson material, and mine? Stuff grounded in universal laws, stuff grounded in universal principles of operations, grounded in mental laws of operation, biological laws of operation, and so forth, properly applied in a logical sequence with earnestness and constructive motives. Will it work to somebody? It looks like on a static view, like it's not really doing much at all. This person can't even get the hang of this stuff, and this person's too whacked out. Will it help in the more dynamic view? And my answer is yes. Yes. Somebody else watching, just taking a like a snapshot view, 10 years after the person has begun to say, I've been doing this for 10 years, and this static viewpoint person, observer, might say, well, I don't see that you have, oh, geez, you're still whacked out, man. I don't know where you started at, but see, they don't know where the person started at. Maybe they do know where the person started at, but they don't see much change over 10 years. But let's say the person who has been doing this work for that decade went at it with as much earnestness as this person could conjure up, and with pretty well developed and refined motives. Just so happens, let's say, but not much worked. But the person went at it appropriately, correctly, to the best of their ability at that time, or through that period, in that duration. I would say that what somebody else might say is minimal progress, perhaps is for the individual who's making that minimal progress from somebody else's point of view, for that person, maybe that's as much progress being made, given the starting point and the obstacles in the way, just as much progress, relatively speaking, as someone else who had a much different starting point, didn't have severe mental illness in the way, makes in 10 years. Which, from a more static viewpoint or just cursory assessment, somebody else might think is great progress, whereas this other guy, poor schmuck here, didn't make much at all. Perhaps just as much really took place for each person. It's a matter of their starting point and what obstacles were in the way. So my point here is, if you happen to have, let's say, like me, borderline personality disorder difficulties, something like that, okay? If you think, well, this stuff isn't going to help me, I can't focus, my sense of values, my sense of identity shifts around every day. Oh my God, I damn near have multiple personality disorder, for God's sakes. What I do one day isn't going to apply the next day, and then maybe the third day later it might come around to applying again. I'm just everywhere, man. I'm on the verge of everything. Is this going to really work for me? My progress is going to be really slow. I have almost no willpower at all. Hell, it could take me the rest of my life just to, on willpower work, just to be able to get enough to pay attention to the instructions that I'm supposed to be following in the first place. Okay, that's progress. Anything in the right direction is progress. And if it happens to go slower than somebody else, or be operating or taking place at a much more primary, early primitive level than somebody else, so what? It's movement in the right direction. See, here's a good point about any of this kind of work. No matter what your starting point is, what your obstacles are, how far along you are, relatively speaking, with respect to other people or where you could be, as opposed to where you're at the moment. One thing to make sure of is that you don't strain. Okay? No strain. No strain. Nothing about this should be taken on as a strain or a stressful activity. If it starts to be a strain, you're not doing it right. You need to back off from the strain and the stress. Just do it easily. Your mind, for example, is not there to be broken. It's there to be trained. And if it seems untrainable, well, everybody's is at some phase of being somewhat untrainable. I mean, when does it end? Where does it start? No definitive answer to either of those questions. No. No strain. It's there to be trained, brought under control. Now, part of this no strain, one aspect of that is to do this comfortably, not just easily, but comfortably. Like, for example, if you are engaging in a method, a technique, or a method of action toward developing a new way of being, an evolved way of being, a constructively evolved way of being, and you find that you come upon a step that, belief in the result is going to play a big role, but you just can't wrap your mind around actually having too much trust in this technique or this next step for yourself. Then it's probably not the right next step for you. It's probably not the next step. Back off a little bit. Stay with what you can do comfortably. Stay at the leading edge of your comfort. Okay, sure. So that comfort horizon can expand. And the next thing will come into view. The next thing that maybe several steps back would seem unattainable, not believable, not comfortable. You see what I'm saying? If it's not believable, and you go about a step and you really don't have much faith in it, there's going to be stress. Well, then that's not comfortable. And that's going to cause a feeling of straining. So stay with what's comfortable, okay? Do what you can do. It's going to go a lot better. And persevere, be earnest. You know, refine your motives as much as you can as you go. Easily, comfortably. Stick with what your mind can work on comfortably until a next step becomes the next thing. And then easily step into that. This may go slow for you. It may not appear to go at all. It may appear to not go at all for a long time. But if you are earnest and you follow the rules within your comfort zone the best you can, given your obstacles and your starting point, progress will be made. It will happen. If the procedures are the right ones, if they do correspond with reality, if it's the right stuff, in other words, if the necessary conditions for progress are being provided to you, are accessible to you, if you have them in your hands, and then you apply the sufficient condition, you do them. You apply those necessary conditions. The work. You actually do it as prescribed. You know, do it. Your progress may be imperceptible, but let's not put a time limit on this. You know, like you should be able to achieve 100% self-mastery within 10 years. Well, hey, maybe if you're 99.99999% there already, yeah, in 10 years, you'll slip over to 100%. If such a thing exists, 100%. Just a hypothetical thing for, a heuristic device here to, drive across my point, drive home my point. Let's say there are lifetimes involved here. That doesn't mean forget about it now. No. No, this just means that it may take a long time. But you want to make progress? You don't want to be stuck in the same rut next lifetime or 10 lifetimes from now. Let's just say lifetimes. Okay, let's just assume that corresponds with reality. Or just this whole lifetime. But you live 500 years. Let's do that. Maybe it'll take 400 out of them 500 years. Maybe in this lifetime, let's say you start this at the age of 60 and you die at 80, in those 20 years, and your starting point was rather primitive and your obstacles were huge, you may not see much progress in that 20 years. Does that mean it doesn't work for you? No. Maybe you just have a lot more, preliminary work to do before you catch up with somebody else. But why compare yourself with others? You may just become either vain or bitter that way, comparing yourself with others. It's not a good idea to compare one's own progress in life with others, right? Or one's position in life with others. It's not a good idea. You may become vain if you think you're, further along than most other people. Or you become bitter if you think you're falling behind most other people. It's not a good assessment. Especially true, this idea, this principle. Just try to avoid comparing yourself with others. Especially with this kind of work. Especially with this kind of work. This is yours. And yours alone. This is your course of experience. And control over yourself. This is your course of experience. And observation, and perception, and action. This is yours. And whatever progress you do make is yours. To keep. It can't be taken from you. You may move backwards. Don't forget, in the big picture, the dynamic picture, even that movement backwards for a while may be part of the bigger movement forwards. Things sometimes have to take a break. They have to incubate. Don't stress. As long as you are doing the work earnestly, easily, comfortably, and with constructive motives over the long picture, you will make progress, given that that work is the work that will put you in that direction. And all you have to do is do it. Doesn't matter if it seems like work isn't happening, progress or results aren't happening right now. Maybe for 20 years. It doesn't matter. If you're doing it, progress is happening at some level. You're not aware of all the levels in the first place. Progress will be happening. Eventually, you'll notice. Eventually, something's going to surface to your conscious awareness. It's going to have to sooner or later. Maybe things will appear right away, your conscious awareness. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll appear rapidly and then slow way down and then get more rapid again. It's all in accordance with your course of experience and practice. Your starting point, your obstacles, your opportunities. Yours, yours, yours. It's yours to do. The results are yours, and they're going to happen in accordance with your states of affairs. So don't get discouraged. Sometimes I feel like I have no right to talk about any of this stuff, because a person could easily look at me and say, "You're no example. You're supposed to be leading things here, leading people along in this way. Yeah, lead by example, dude, and you're a poor example." Hey, back off with that. Yeah, lead by example. The general in the war, be out there in the front with his sword drawn, charge, and he's out in the front. Yeah, lead by example. Bravery. Yeah, look at the general. Yeah, we take him to be an example of bravery. We take him to be an example of all of that good stuff. All right, sure. Everybody charge forward. Look at the general. He's a good example. He's war-torn. He doesn't care. Damn the torpedoes. Full speed ahead. Captain said so. Captain's doing it. Fine. Okay, yeah. That applies to a lot of things. Lead by example. But that lead by example thing gets really easily mixed up with comparing oneself with others. Like, look at him. He's a good example. I compare myself to him. I see that I can, I have a lot of catching up to do with him. I'll take his way of going about stuff as an example of how I should do things. Yeah, that's a comparison going on. This is not one of those things where it's necessarily the case that if a person can't lead by example, then he's not worth listening to. That may not be the case with this kind of work. Yeah, I might be a poor example to one guy, but a good one to the next. I'm not worried about leading you by example. I'm worried about giving you good information as it comes easily to me and comfortably to me to do so. Yeah, borderline personality disorder is an obstacle. But this material has helped me immensely. You might not know that, but I do. I might know what I'm talking about. And the fact that I'm not a good example for some is a testament to that. I know what progress can be achieved with this material. I know it personally. And I feel confident about it. That's what matters to me. And what should matter to you is whether this material suits you comfortably. and suits you workingly, pragmatically, whether it rings intuitively true for you now, whether it's logical to you now, whether it corresponds with whatever starting point you are at now. Whether it's the kind of thing you're looking for now. That's what's important here. Not what your obstacles are, not whether you have some mental illness. All right? Yes, it can and will help you if you do it. But the degree to which it's going to help may not look the same to everybody. I'm Theron Q Ramacharaka. Be well.